There is a precise psychological shift that occurs when you open your banking application, and rather than slamming your phone shut in a wave of immediate dread, you actually experience a sense of calm. It is the exact moment you stop performing frantic mental math at the grocery checkout or calculating whether an luxury cup of coffee will sentence you to a week of instant ramen. Most mainstream financial commentators insist that true peace of mind requires a seven-figure net worth, or that a six-figure salary is the mandatory gateway to stability. However, this conventional wisdom overlooks a much smaller, far more critical milestone that fundamentally transforms your psychological relationship with currency. Once you cross this specific boundary, the mechanics of your financial life alter permanently. That magic number is $20,000. When analyzing wealth accumulation and behavioral finance, it becomes clear why certain individuals effortlessly compound their assets, while others remain trapped in identical, stagnant financial cycles for decades. True wealth building does not operate on a linear scale, nor does it rely on sudden magical windfalls. Instead, the financial journey is governed by distinct thresholds that function as invisible barriers. Until you cross them, you are playing the game under an entirely different, much harsher set of rules. A capital base of $20,000 represents the very first major boundary separating those destined to build significant wealth from those who will spend their entire lives bound to the grueling cycle of paycheck-to-paycheck survival. To visualize this process, imagine attempting to push a massive stone boulder up a steep incline. The initial phase is universally miserable. You are straining every muscle, sweating profusely, making microscopic progress, and constantly questioning whether the effort is futile. This is what the early stages of saving feel like. However, once you generate sufficient momentum and finally push that asset base over the crest of the hill, a dramatic shift occurs. The boulder begins to move under its own power, and as it rolls down the opposite side, the momentum does the heavy lifting for you. Achieving a $20,000 balance is the exact moment your financial boulder crests that hill. Everything experienced prior to this milestone feels like a desperate struggle against economic gravity. Everything achieved afterward feels as though gravity has finally joined your team. The core transformation that occurs at this level is not merely mathematical, it is deeply neurological. When an individual possesses zero liquid reserves, their brain operates continuously within what cognitive psychologists classify as a scarcity mindset or survival mode. Under these conditions, every single career and life decision is filtered through a lens of fear and immediate vulnerability. You are forced to accept toxic job offers because you lack the financial runway to negotiate or walk away. You remain in hostile environments because resignation feels like an existential risk. You consistently say yes to demands that compromise your well-being simply because you require immediate cash flow to cover the upcoming rent cycle. When you are trapped in this survival loop, your prefrontal cortex is so overwhelmed by short-term threats that it literally lacks the cognitive bandwidth required to analyze long-term growth and strategic opportunity. It is the psychological equivalent of trying to map out a 10-year career plan while your immediate residence is actively on fire. Your mind is entirely consumed by the necessity of immediate suppression. When you cross the $20,000 threshold, you effectively extinguish that fire and create invaluable psychological breathing room. Data from major asset management firms, including Vanguard, notes that establishing even a baseline $2,000 emergency fund enhances an individual's perceived financial well-being by a staggering 21%. While $2,000 is a brilliant starting point, expanding that buffer to encompass 3 to 6 months of actual living expenses, which routinely correlates to the $20,000 mark, provides a profound secondary boost to your financial agency. You transition from a purely reactive state of wealth preservation to a highly proactive state of deliberate wealth creation. Once your mind is freed from the cognitive tax of survival, the underlying mathematics of compounding can take center stage. Consider a practical scenario. You commit to saving $1,000 every single month while securing an average 8% annualized return through diversified investments. Accumulating your initial $20,000 will require approximately 19 months of unyielding discipline, personal sacrifice, and delayed gratification. This is the hardest part of the journey, and it is precisely where the vast majority of people surrender. However, the secondary timeline accelerates immediately afterward because your second $20,000 does not take another 19 months. It only takes about 17 months. You perform the exact same amount of physical labor, sacrifice the identical $1,000 per month, and assume the exact same market risks. Yet you shaved 2 entire months off the timeline simply because your first $20,000 was in the market actively generating its own returns. By the time you pursue your third interval, the timeline shrinks even further as your money does an increasing share of the heavy lifting. When you reach the truly large numbers, the acceleration becomes almost comical. Once you hit $400,000 in your investment portfolio, that exact same $20,000 increment, which originally required nearly 2 years of exhausting manual labor to accumulate, materializes automatically in less than 5 months without you needing to contribute an extra dime. The initial milestone feels nearly impossible, but every subsequent milestone rewards you with increased velocity. This phenomenon is not driven by exclusive elite hedge funds or secret investment vehicles reserved for the ultra-wealthy. It is simply the beautiful reality of scale. If you invest $1,000 and capture a solid 10% annual return, you earn $100. A pleasant result, but one that will not alter your socioeconomic reality. Apply that identical 10% return to a $20,000 principal balance, and you suddenly generate $2,000 in passive returns. At this scale, the yield transforms into meaningful capital that can directly offset living costs or accelerate future investments. The strategy does not change, the scale does. The true value of accumulating $20,000 does not reside in the digital ledger balance itself, but rather in the profound identity shift required to acquire it. Unless you received an inheritance or are operating with an incredibly inflated income, saving this amount demands a systematic rewriting of your daily behavioral habits. It requires you to track cash flow meticulously, reject impulse consumerism, navigate social pressures, and master the art of delayed gratification over an extended timeline. Through this process, you effectively prove to yourself that you are a competent manager of capital rather than a passive victim of economic circumstances. You transition from a person who uses mental gymnastics to justify small purchases to an investor who optimizes macroscopic decisions. You stop obsessing over micromanagement, such as agonizing over the price difference between generic and name-brand groceries, and redirect that finite mental bandwidth toward optimized housing arrangements, salary negotiations, and investment allocations. Furthermore, this baseline cushion completely redefines how you perceive external events. When you live paycheck to paycheck, an unexpected car repair or a broken laptop is a devastating financial crisis that can derail your entire year. When you hold $20,000 in liquid reserves, those identical events are downgraded to minor brief inconveniences. More importantly, your eyes open to upside opportunities that were previously invisible. When a promising business venture arises, you actually possess the liquidity to buy in. When a market downturn drops the price of valuable equities, you can comfortably deploy capital while others panic. And when an expensive, career-altering industry credential presents itself, you can easily fund it yourself rather than begging an employer for corporate approval. This is what is meant when people say money attracts money. Having capital grants you options, and options create massive leverage. Perhaps the most radical disruption occurs within your professional life. An individual with zero savings is, by definition, an economic captive to their current employer. Even if the management is toxic, the culture is soul-crushing, and the compensation is deeply insulting, you cannot leave because you are entirely dependent on the next payroll cycle to survive. This systemic vulnerability destroys your professional leverage. You cannot effectively demand a raise, challenge unreasonable corporate directives, or voice innovative ideas because you are operating from a baseline fear of termination. A liquid balance of $20,000 functions as formidable walking away money. It grants you the ultimate career luxury, the ability to comfortably survive for 6 months or more, while intentionally seeking an optimal professional pivot. You do not even have to actively spend the money to feel its power. Simply knowing the capital exists completely alters your posture, tone, and confidence in the workplace. You begin negotiating from a position of absolute strength. You express bold ideas, establish firm boundaries around your personal time, and request the market rate compensation you actually deserve. If management responds poorly, you hold the ultimate trump card. This quiet confidence routinely commands deep professional respect, frequently resulting in faster promotions, higher bonuses, and superior assignments. The greatest tragedy in modern personal finance is watching an individual cross this $20,000 threshold, experience the initial intoxicating wave of financial security, and immediately liquidate their freedom to purchase a depreciating consumer asset. The most common culprit is the modern automobile. The average consumer routinely dedicates $600 to $800 per month toward vehicle payments, insurance, fuel, and maintenance, completely oblivious to the massive opportunity cost of that decision. Consider the true cost of driving a premium $30,000 vehicle off a dealership lot. That same capital invested in a diversified portfolio at an 8% return could easily grow to over $140,000 over a 20-year horizon, whereas the car actively destroys 20% of its value the exact moment it leaves the lot. When you view financial decisions through the lens of opportunity cost, a flashy car payment no longer looks like a symbol of achievement. It looks like an anchor holding you down. Choosing to drive a reliable, modest vehicle is not an act of miserable deprivation. It is a conscious, high-level strategy designed to purchase your ultimate personal freedom. Ultimately, $20,000 will not allow you to retire tomorrow, but it completely breaks the systemic chains of economic survival. It transitions you from a defensive posture of reacting to life's emergencies to an offensive posture of designing your own destiny. The foundation of your lifelong financial freedom depends entirely on your willingness to build this initial momentum. Commit to reaching this threshold today, because the future version of yourself is entirely dependent on the discipline you choose to exhibit right now.